The Mitsubishi Pajero 4 petrol engines are, to put it mildly, conservative. The 6G7 engine series traces its origins back to the 1990s, with the second-generation Pajero. They have cast iron blocks, 4 valves per cylinder, but 1 camshaft in each cylinder head and a timing belt drive. There are hydraulic compensators in the valve drive, and if the timing belt breaks, the valves collide with the pistons. 3.0 V6 177 horsepower, 6G72. The 3-liter engine is extremely simple and reliable, with passive intake manifold, without MIVEC. This is what you buy when you need maximum reliability, at the cost of enormous fuel consumption. It is not demanding on fuel or oil, but the 3-liter engine does not have enough power either on the highway or off-road. All the hassle with it is replacing the timing belt every 90,000 kilometers and replacing the valve cover gaskets. 3.8 V6 245 to 265 horsepower. 6G75. The oldest motor in the 6G7 series appeared in 2002 and received the MIVEC system in 2005. In 2009 it underwent modernization, which cured it from oil starvation and cranking of liners. This problem no longer occurs. A few words about the MIVEC system on the 3.86 G75 engine. There are no phase shifters here and there cannot be. In this case, MIVEC resembles the VTEC system from Honda. Here, with the help of plunger stops in the rocker arms, intermediate T-shaped arms and 5 cams with an increased profile for opening the intake valves, the opening height of these very valves changes. This means that in addition to the standard 4-cam camshaft for each cylinder, there is also a 5th cam with an enlarged profile to increase the opening phase and opening height of the intake valves. Switching between valve heights occurs at 3,500 revolutions per minute. Hydraulic distributors with solenoids, 1028A046, are located at the rear of each cylinder head. The most deadly problem with the 3.8 engine is that the intake manifold length change flaps get into the cylinders. The dampers and their axis are located in a separate spacer, MN 135871. The axle mounts are poorly made. The only decent bushing is at the front near the actuator. All other supports are too thin. The problem starts with wear on the rear hub. Play in the damper axis appears, accelerating wear of the remaining supports. The more wear and vibration of the axle, the more the steel flaps rub against the intake manifold. As a result, the valves burst in half along the axis, their torn halves fly into the cylinders and are hit by the pistons. This happened already at 90,000 kilometers. It is advisable to inspect this unit every 60,000 kilometers and promptly eliminate the play using repair bushings. It is advisable to attach the screws of each damper with thread adhesive. Other antics of this engine: a cracked exhaust manifold, as well as tired injectors. If a warm engine starts hesitantly 20 minutes after installation, then most likely the injectors need to be changed. And problems with air leaks into the intake are associated with wear of the front bushing of the damper axle. There are no more special problems with the 3.8-liter Mitsubishi engine. 3.2 did 175 to 200 horsepower. 4M41. The 3.2-liter diesel engine for the Pajero 4 is the 4M41 inline 4. We have a video review of such a unit, however, its old version without common rail, but with a Zexel VRZ distribution injection pump. This engine has a timing chain drive, but it is advisable to change the chain tensioner, 1141A045, every 150,000 kilometers, or at least remove the valve cover at this interval to inspect the protrusion of the tensioner rod. In this case, you need to make sure that the guide shoes are not cracked and that the upper one, 1140A026, is still in place. By the way, it is advisable to remove the valve cover even earlier, every 100,000 kilometers. To control and adjust the thermal clearances of the valves, they are adjusted using screws and lock nuts. The Denso fuel system is considered finicky and practically unrepairable. Although if the diesel fuel is of acceptable quality, then the injection pump and injectors last more than 400,000 kilometers. Due to low-quality fuel, the control valve on the fuel pump is the first to suffer. A hefty crankshaft damper pulley, 1104A082, lasts about 100,000 kilometers, and an original new one costs about $200. A single turbine may howl after 200,000 kilometers, plus the standard, but inexpensive hassle of the EGR system. 4M41 engines are also blamed for cylinder head cracking. This is not to say that there are many such cases. However, blockheads for these motors for Pajero 4 are not often found on sale. They cost from $500 to $800, and sellers almost always sell them tested for leaks and absence of cracks. V5M31EX5 6-speed manual transmission. Pajero 4 meets 6-speed manual transmission. This is a reliable unit and fully repairable. Although it is often cheaper to buy a used transmission, they are not in demand. Automatic transmission, V4A5A7 4-street automatic transmission, V5A5A7, V5A51 5-street automatic transmission. 4-street. The automatic transmission on the Pajero 4 is paired with a 3-liter turbo engine. With other gasoline engines, 3.2 and 3.8, it comes with a slightly younger 5-speed. Fellow. Also 5-street automatic works in tandem with a diesel engine until restyling. These transmissions were developed and produced by Mitsubishi itself. These are extremely durable transmissions, but their reverse clutches are rather weak. When slipping hard in reverse, their paper linings literally wear off, crumble and clog the valve body. All their other breakdowns are purely senile. For example, plastic tubes in the hydraulic unit may fall apart into dust, and shaft speed sensors may go blind due to adhering chips. To fill these transmissions, oil with SPIVE approval is used. The filter is changed after removing the pan Mr. 528,836. It is possible to drain only 5 liters of oil through the pan, and it is topped up through the dipstick tube. V5 off K, Aisin A750F, 5-street automatic transmission. Since July 2011, along with a 3.2-liter diesel engine, a new 5-speed gearbox was installed. Automatic transmission. This is already the brainchild of the Aisin company. By the way, this automatic machine does not have a probe. It is super reliable, and also fast and economical. There are cases when the contact group located outside on the housing suffers from moisture in this transmission. This transmission works great on ATF Toyota WS and its analogs. The filter 2804A020 is accessible after removing the pan. The level is set using the overflow plug in the pan. The oil itself is poured through a separate plug, 24 wrench, located on the rear right of the body. The Mitsubishi Pajero 4 does not have a vacuum brake booster, since the master brake cylinder is assisted by a special hydraulic pump, and the brake pedal does not have a direct connection with the brake calipers. It must be said that the electro-hydraulic brake mechanism turned out to be quite reliable. At high mileage, the electric motor of the pump stops turning on for a completely banal reason. The carbon brushes almost completely wipe the copper commutator of the pump. In this case, the braking efficiency is greatly reduced, an alarm buzzer bell begins to sound, and the red ABS indicators on the instrument panel light up. If you open the hood and tap on the pump motor housing, it can come to life and pump up pressure in the system. This may be enough to get to the service station with brakes. A new hydraulic pump costs more than $800, MN $102,843, but the electric motor manifold can be replaced with a new one. There is a special non-original repair kit. Mitsubishi's Super Select 2 transmission is equipped with a center differential, and the drive to the front axle can be switched off. In rear-wheel drive mode, the front drive shaft is disconnected from the transfer case, and the right front drive is disconnected from the front differential. To do this, place a stocking under the intermediate shaft with a special coupling that disconnects the intermediate shaft and the drive connected to it. The clutch is equipped with an on/off fork and is driven by a vacuum actuator, MR 453711. All this works reliably and for a long time. Sometimes the rear gearbox of the Pajero 4 starts to hum. Fans of this SUV even made a study on how to distinguish its cause by its hum. The most dangerous hum is the one that occurs when coasting in gear, i.e. when engine braking is performed. If the hum appears only when coasting, then this indicates that the nut, MU 430002, of the gearbox shank has become loose, i.e. input shaft. Access to it opens after unscrewing the rear CV joint of the rear universal joint. Strong unscrewing of this nut threatens the death of the rear gearbox. This nut must be tightened with a force of 216 Newton meters. And if at the same time a leak is detected in the oil seal, MB 664285, of the rear gearbox flange, then it needs to be changed and, preferably, the gearbox locking sleeve, MB 837842, needs to be changed. A humming noise at highway speeds that gets worse as you accelerate usually indicates we're on the main gear. The rear gear bearings produce a hum at lower speeds, but it can also be confused with noise from the rear drive shaft or rear wheel bearings. On top of the rear gearbox there is a pump that creates air pressure to engage the rear differential lock. Usually nothing happens to this node. The differential lock and the rear axle differential itself can wear out after unsuccessful rides on the asphalt. The rear drive shaft with CV joints at both ends is very reliable. The CV joints are repairable, and the backlash of the rear universal joint coupled with shocks when switching from forward to reverse is usually caused by wear of the splines on the ends of the propeller shaft for the internal races of the CV joints. The driveshaft splines can only be restored by specialized specialists, although some do it cheaply and simply. They fill the splines with some kind of fixative glue. The front driveshaft often appears in repairs. It has a CV joint only on the transfer case side. It dies with the accompanying squeaking and grinding noise when all-wheel drive is engaged due to holes in the boot. This CV joint is non-separable, so any crunch on its side means replacing the front driveshaft. Front driveshaft is a minimum of $600, Mr. $580,390. There are analog substitutes for $200. Repair options have also been invented. Welding a hybrid driveshaft with a collapsible CV joint from a Mitsubishi Delica and removing the CV joint and replacing it with a crosspiece. The front crosspiece is maintenance-free, i.e. without grease nibbles. But if necessary, you can change the crosspiece and equip it with a grease fitting. You can change the oil in the gearboxes and transfer case. For this purpose, there are drain plugs and filler controls everywhere. Both gearboxes hold just under 3 liters of 75 watts -90 GL5 oil, and the transfer case holds about 2.5 liters of 75 watts -90 GL4 oil. With huge mileage, it will be necessary to replace 2 silent blocks through which the rear gearbox is attached to the rear subframe. These silent blocks, MR 418671 and MR 554076, originally cost up to $20 apiece. The transfer case is vacuum controlled. A pair of electric vacuum valves responsible for switching modes, 8657A031, are located under the hood between the neck of the washer reservoir and the headlight. Most often, problems with them arise due to burst tubes. On the top of the transfer case itself there are 5 limit sensors that fix the positions of the forks. All sensors are different, although they look almost the same. The original ones cost $40 to $50 each, MR 580151, MR 580155. Non-original ones are cheaper than $15. The wires of these sensors fray or they themselves fail due to corrosion or simply old age. Typically, trouble codes pinpoint the faulty sensor. Very rarely does the chain 3220A002 begin to make noise in this transmission. Also, play in both cartons can be caused by wear of the connecting bushings in the transfer case itself. The front brake calipers on the Pajero 4 have a fixed design with 4 pistons each. Such brakes need to be serviced every 2 to 3 years. Since the rubber cuffs do not last very long, they tear, after which the pistons corrode and begin to jam. Seized brake pistons have a significant impact on braking performance. Brake discs often become deformed after intense braking. The more the discs are worn out and corroded, the higher the likelihood of deformation. The rear brakes have single-piston floating calipers and a drum parking brake mechanism. The rear calipers also have to be serviced every couple of years due to cracked guide boots, jammed calipers and pistons. And let's return to corrosion again. It readily eats brake pipes. Don't delay replacing them. The front wheel bearings, 3880A012, are rather weak. Even an original that costs $180 often has to be replaced every 100,000 kilometers. The same can be said about the rear wheel hubs, 3780A011. Non-original wheel bearings for Pajero 4 cost $90. On Pajero 4, the eccentric camber bolts become sour, so they have to be cut off. This damages the silent blocks of the lower arm. There are a total of 4 such eccentric bolts in the front suspension, in each silent block of the lower arm. If you had to cut the bolts 4013A082, you will have to buy both nuts 4013A187 and washers 4013A097. A set of original camber bolts for the front suspension will cost $55, or substitutes 2 times cheaper. In the rear suspension everything is the same, 4 eccentric bolts 4113A053 become sour. They have to be cut off and replaced along with nuts 4013A187 and washers 4013A097. To prevent the bolts from souring, they must be lubricated with Movil or another suitable compound. In general, soured camber bolts are a reason for bargaining. Since the Mitsubishi Pajero 4 has a load-bearing body with powerful side members of the built-in frame type, all suspensions are mounted on subframes. It is curious that Mitsubishi engineers decided to bolt the subframes to the side members without any silent blocks, and this affects ride comfort. All suspensions on the Pajero 4 are independent wishbones. This is a significant difference from both the Pajero 3 and any Land Cruiser Prado. The weak point of the front suspension is the front stabilizer bushings. They last about 30,000 to 50,000 kilometers and cost from $3 to $10, MR 554271. Even the front stabilizer bars, 4056A133, last longer and cost between $10 and $35 each. The original front suspension arms are sold only assembled. Upper original control arms assemblies cost $160 to $230, and lower ones cost $180 each. Non-original levers, from $70. You can buy silent blocks separately, for $8 to $15. There are offers for ball joints, for $20 to $25. A knocking noise occurs in the rear suspension due to play in the shock absorbers, the upper rubber bushing breaks, and this is where the knocking occurs. The original rubber bushings are sold separately, MR 418,160. You may also need a washer for it, MR 418,162. The rear upper control arm ball joint, 4110A073, is sold separately for $40. The original upper arm, 4110A076, cost about $500, but each non-original silent block for it costs $10 to $20. Separately, you can buy branded silent blocks for the spring-loaded lever, MR 374,672, $15, and for the trailing lever, its front silent block, 4125A006, costs up to $40. All other silent blocks are available only as non-original ones, and their price is no more than $20 per piece. We have already talked about camber eccentric bolts. The paint layer of the Pajero 4 is thin and soft. It scratches quickly, so almost any off-road adventure leaves marks on its paint. The body metal of the Pajero 4 does not resist corrosion well and readily rusts. Let's start from the very top. If the Pajero 4 has a sunroof, then it is imperative to protect its frame from corrosion. It rusts simply from rainwater. It is the sunroof glass frame that rusts. Corrosion can be seen in the spring after the hatches first open. If the corrosion is advanced, it will lift and protrude the upper sealing rubber, which will give water a path into the interior. Often you can simply clean the removed frame and spray paint it with black paint. Then it must be coated with a consistent water-repellent composition, and this treatment must be carried out annually. And under the upper rubber seal, it is worth applying silicone so that it glues the rubber to the glass, blocking the path of water. When servicing the sunroof, you need to clean the drains in the roof so that moisture from the gutter under the sunroof drains easily and does not spill onto the roof lining. On pre-restyling Pajero 4, moisture can accumulate under the rubber molding, which will also subsequently lead to corrosion. Restyled cars do not have such an elastic band, so the paint on the front edge of the roof breaks through with pebbles, and bare metal easily rusts in spots. Even on the roof, corrosion appears near the fastenings for the roof rails, luggage crossbars. Corrosion is slowly developing under all door and door seals. In the 10th year of life, the body paint underneath takes on a characteristic red tint. The rear door seals closest to the edge rub the paint in the opening on the surface of the rear arches. They are helped in this by dirt and sand that sticks to them in wet weather. As the rear door hinges sag, its play increases. As a result of minimal friction, the paint on the door itself and in its opening is rubbed down to metal, especially on the left, driver's, side. In addition, moisture seeping or condensing in the internal cavities of all doors leads to corrosion, which will then break out. The pipe from the fuel filler neck to the tank suffers from corrosion. It is located behind the locker, but dirt still packs tightly there. Within 5 to 10 years, depending on the region of operation, the pipe rusts through. Especially where it bends and goes under the bottom of the Pajero 4. In this place it is sandblasted by dirt and sand flying from the wheel. The fuel tank of the Pajero 4 is also rusting. Moreover, this problem is known from its predecessor, but some owners of these SUVs manage in 2024 to encounter both a leaking tank, as well as a leaking filling pipe, and dirt and sand getting into the tank. The bottom line is that the tank is covered from below with protection, which collects dirt, sand and moisture in the rear part. This is where corrosion of the tank develops through holes. In this place, in the back of the protection, you need to drill drainage holes. You can install an aftermarket tank protector that already has holes in it to prevent dirt from collecting under the tank. There is a gap at the top between the tank and the bottom, in which everything that leads to corrosion also collects. To prevent rust holes from appearing there, the outside of the tank needs to be thoroughly washed a couple of times a year. Also along the bottom of the Pajero 4, pipes for the air conditioning and heating system stretch to the rear evaporator and heater. The air conditioner tubes are the first to fail due to through corrosion, and then the tubes through which antifreeze circulates. Most often this happens in the area of the rear right wheel, in places where these tubes are pressed by clamps to the bottom. In general, corrosion is the main enemy of this SUV. By the way, although the spare wheel bracket is covered with a decorative casing, it also rusts thoroughly. The windshield of the Pajero 4 is considered a consumable. Stones hitting it almost on the first try lead to the appearance of a crack. On a Pajero 4 with standard xenon headlights, After 5 to 7 years, the lens reflectors become blind, the mirror coating falls off from them, and the body position sensors, which help the automatic corrector to correctly position the headlight beams, fail due to soured hinges or internal electrical failure. Usually the rear sensor joints are the first to be sealed, because the protective anthers tear, and then dirt and moisture do their job. The rear original body position sensor costs $180, 8651A065, its analogs are 3 to 5 times cheaper. Rods for replacing old ones are also offered separately. The front sensor, 8651A064, today costs more than $400, but numerous analogs and repair kits allow you to solve the problem with it much cheaper. The trapezium of the front wipers on the Pajero 4 often turned sour already in the third year of operation. Often this ended with one of the rods being disconnected. One of the wipers stopped swinging. All rods are connected to each other by plastic bushings and hinges. They don't break so much as they wear out, which leads to the hinges popping out of the bushings. If you clean and lubricate the hinges every couple of years, the trapezoid will last a very long time. A new original trapezoid, 8251A019, without a servomotor costs about $110. Non-original analogs are 3 times cheaper. Bushings from the repair kit for Lada Kalina, 1,118 to 370,533, are also suitable for the Pajero 4 windshield wiper trapezium. The rear windshield wiper of the Pajero 4 is rather weak from the factory. Its pressure spring is rather weak, so after 2 to 3 years the rear wiper began to clean the glass with stripes and gaps. There are many solutions to this weakness, from tensioning the spring, placing rubber bands under it, to installing other leashes. The leash from the Vaz 2111, 21,110 6,313,150 and its analogs, HL0 3150, 63.5205800, fit well here. True, such a driver has a wider hole for the shaft, but this gap can be compensated for either with aluminum strips or with homemade bushings. And instead of a standard wiper with a length of 35 centimeters, you can install a longer one, 38 centimeters. The fastening is common, a hook. Sometimes the rear wiper refuses to work because its gearbox jams due to drying out. Lubricant and dirt trapped inside prevent its operation. Almost always, cleaning and lubricating the gearbox revitalizes the entire rear wiper servo. The rear spoiler of the Pajero 4 can rattle in frosty weather. Ice will rattle inside it. While driving, of course. In warm weather, you can simply open the back door and shake it. If water has collected in the spoiler, it will flop around there. What to do about it? You can simply drill tiny holes in the corners of the spoiler. This is where the water gets in. You can remove the spoiler. It is fastened with 2 M10 screws and nuts, access to which is under the plugs on the spoiler itself and on the upper frame of the trunk door. Next, you just need to pull it off the plastic pistons. Water enters the spoiler from above through a weakened seal. Over time, the trunk door under the spoiler begins to rust, near the holes for screws and mounting clips, under the side slopes, corners of the spoiler, and even just in any places. Paint can swell even where there is no obvious damage. The trunk door of the Mitsubishi Pajero swings open to the right side. Both of its loops sag over time. As in all such cases, you need to either replace the hinges with new ones, 5822A013, MR 436611, 5822A021, or install adjusting washers, spacers, which come in different thicknesses, MR 436618, MR 436619. The washer can only be placed under the bottom hinge. Another repair option, grinding out the bushings on the axis of the worn hinges. Door stops quickly wear out. Stop holding the doors in any position and begin to click loudly. Surprisingly, a pair of original front door stops today costs about $23, 5702A007, and about the same price for a pair of rear door stops, 5732A020. In addition, you can disassemble the limiters to replace worn crackers in them. New ones are produced by specialized workshops. The problem of door stop wear is so pressing for Pajero 4 that their owners have found that door stops from Lexus G's model 2005 to 2012, 68,610 to 30,180, 68,630 to 30,200, are ideal. True, each such limiter costs more than $80, but you can buy them used from car dismantling yards. Sometimes Pajero 4 has problems with the ignition switch contact group, MB900 3639, the lock does not work, i.e. it is not possible to turn on the ignition or start the engine the first time. The original contact group costs no more than $30. Well, if the buttons on the steering wheel and their backlighting start to turn off one by one or work every other time, then you will have to change the steering column cable. The original costs $180, 8619A018, and replacements cost up to $50.